husband said he wanted a traditional household. Now he's begging me to go back to work. As my husband and I were celebrating my promotion, he suddenly said, "This isn't working anymore. You're never home. The house is a disaster." My grandfather worked while my grandmother managed the home, and they were married for 62 years. I nearly choked on my tiramisu. "Wait, are you asking me to quit my job?" "Not asking," he corrected, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "I want a traditional 1950s household where the wife takes care of the home and the husband provides. It's proven to work better than this modern chaos." I was baffled. I thought back to yesterday, how my boss had offered me a 6-month break without penalties because I looked so exhausted, and then I told my husband, "Fine, you want a traditional 1950s household? That's exactly what you'll get." The next Monday, I called my boss and told him I was taking his offer for my break, and he told me I could come back anytime and start my new position. Perfect. I told my husband I'd quit my job and immediately began transforming our home into his 1950s paradise, though perhaps more literally than he'd anticipated. First, I had our internet disconnected since households in the 1950s didn't have Wi-Fi, explaining to the confused Comcast representative that we were going traditional. When he came home to find me handwriting checks for our bills at the kitchen table, he looked puzzled. "What happened to online banking?" "They didn't have online banking in the 1950s, honey. I'm managing the household finances the traditional way, just like your grandmother would have." I'd also replaced his iPhone alarm with a mechanical wind-up clock that clanged like a fire bell. The next morning, he stumbled downstairs to find me cooking breakfast from scratch on our new vintage 1950s stove I'd bought from an estate sale, having sold our modern appliances on Facebook Marketplace the day before. "Where's the Keurig?" he asked desperately, staring at the percolator brewing coffee. "Keurig wasn't invented until 1998, darling. This percolator makes coffee just like the 1950s. The coffee took 45 minutes and tasted like burnt water. But hey, that's what he wanted, right?" His breakfast of lumpy porridge and burnt toast wasn't much better since I was still learning to use the vintage equipment. When he tried to order lunch delivery to his office, he discovered I'd canceled all our food delivery apps and credit cards except one, which I kept locked in my recipe box. "Your grandfather didn't have DoorDash," I explained sweetly. "I've prepared you a traditional packed lunch like a 1950s wife would." The lunch was a Spam sandwich on white bread with warm milk in a thermos. His coworkers started calling him Vintage Derek after seeing his sad desk lunches. By week 3, my husband was cracking like a dropped egg. I'd implemented a strict household allowance system from a 1955 Good Housekeeping guide, giving him $20 weekly for incidentals and tobacco. When he complained he needed money for gas, I reminded him that I managed all household expenses now, just like a traditional housewife. "But I need to buy a new golf club," he pleaded one evening. "Golf clubs weren't part of the 1950s household budget, dear. Perhaps you could take up whittling." I'd also joined a traditional homemakers club that met during his work hours, spending my days learning to can vegetables and knit. When his boss asked why he couldn't answer emails after 5 p.m., he had to explain that his wife had embraced traditional values and removed modern technology from their home. The boss actually suggested marriage counseling. Then one day, my husband's friends came over for Sunday football. They found no TV. Television was a luxury in the early 1950s. No beer. I'd given him his weekly allowance already. And only homemade gelatin salad for food. "Babe, this has gone too far." My husband hissed in the kitchen while his friends sat bewildered in our TV-less living room listening to our vintage radio. "This is what you wanted," I said, smoothing my vintage apron. "A traditional 1950s household, just like your grandparents had. This way we can stay married for 62 years, am I right?" His friends left after 30 minutes and assumed that we needed mental help. That's when my husband showed his true colors. "I was wrong," he yelled desperately. "I was jealous of your promotion, okay? You were moving up while I've been stuck for 3 years." Then he wildly gestured around at our tech-free kitchen. "But this 1950s thing is torture. No internet, Spam sandwiches, that $20 allowance. I can't live like this. Please go back to work. We'll get our modern life back. All of it." I looked at him with a blank expression, realizing he still didn't know I never actually quit, and decided to play with him a little longer. "Actually, honey, I've completely embraced this traditional lifestyle you said would make us happier. I don't think I could go back." The dumbstruck expression on his face made me laugh so hard that I fell.